in California and just accepted graciously to speak tonight.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate you being here. So today we have this pretty ambitious title. I thought I would create some buzz. Taking F# to the masses with CloudSharper. There's a bunch of things I would like to show you. It's going to be more of a, hey, here's what we have. If you have questions, please ask, kind of a talk. So just feel free to buzz in and I'll try to answer some questions. And Ryan, I don't know how to navigate this Hangout stuff. So if you see any people like typing questions, just please let me know in voice.
I'll be doing that.
Okay, so Matthias is going to do that.
Okay,
I'll do it fast. I don't know if you guys knew this, but today is our national holiday in Hungary. So if you switch on CNN, you'll probably get some glimpse of the fireworks that are happening in different places in Hungary, most notably in Budapest. So that's, I think, from last year. So of course it's much more funky, and you can't see anything from the city itself, but it's a very nice event. I've had the pleasure of being there. It's a lot of people on the streets, and it's just a lot of fun. So I thought I would honor that event since it's actually today. All right. So today I'm going to talk about CloudSharper, which is this online development environment for F#. But reality is that it's a lot more than that. But if we just start as an ID, I think people will more quickly and more readily associate with what it is. And I think it's important that all of you at some point will get a chance to try it and go online and just give it a try. So before I show you what this is, and most of this talk I want to spend in CloudSharper actually, I just want to briefly mention what it is so you don't get confused or you don't set your expectations too high or any of those things. So basically it's an online ID that allows you to develop web and mobile applications. This is what we set out to do originally. So we wanted everyone to have this kind of a hassle-free getting started with F# kind of an experience, and sort of like race to the next level, allowing you to actually do not just fooling around and typing little snippets and getting some responses back, but actually doing like full-fledged development of web applications typically, or mobile web applications. Because we had this technology called WebSharper, and I guess I can switch over to that for a second here. So this is the website for WebSharper in case you haven't seen it. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can see. One thing I want to mention is that we have pretty good tool integration. So you can use Xamarin Studio, you can use Visual Studio, you can even use nothing else. I mean, you can use your own ID if you want, but then you have to invoke certain commands from the command line, and you have to provide for your own automation. In these two major IDs, we actually have pretty seamless integration. So you can get started. We give you templates, you just compile them, run them, change them, and there you have it. You even have single-click deployments, etc. So I just wanted to say that when you go on this website, I mean, there are a couple things here. You can switch to different tabs, and it gives you ideas about the transfer F#. So this is kind of like a little marketing for F# as well. We want to get developers onto F# so they can use this stuff. You can go mobile. These are actual examples from different WebSharper snippets that you can use to develop mobile applications. And then here's this 2-minute sample. So it's basically like, what, 40 lines? And what the 40 lines will do for you is basically address or talk to this visualization library from Google. It's Google Visualization. And as you can see, we have a strongly typed binding for this. And in some part of this code base, like here, you're actually using that API, that strongly typed API. I don't know how much you can actually see. Let me zoom up a little bit like this. So you basically see here I'm using bar charts, and I'm adding that. I'm calling my own draw method that actually will do this nice chart that we see on the right-hand side. So it's just a really tiny example, and I think...
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah, sure.
So the way that code is formatted there, so you've got div and then open brackets and some sort of type character down. So is that essentially setting up a div and then putting all this functionality inside that?
Yeah. So Jack is asking about this here. So that line, so all this, if you observed on the top, we are actually opening some WebSharper libraries and namespaces. So here's Google Visualization, and that has some other internal stuff. So we open that, but then there's this WebSharper.html, which basically is the client-side HTML language popped into your F# scope. So if I say something like div, here this is constructing a client-side, a DOM representation of a div node. And then what I do with that div node is up to me. I could put some stuff in this bracket, and that would populate inner nodes or attributes or whatever you may have, or even events. In this case, we are binding an event. This is our way of binding an event to one of the DOM nodes. I don't know how much you can see. Just let me zoom up like this. And typically, you get all the events that you get in HTML, plus this one here on after render. This is a WebSharper specific event. It just basically means that whenever this div node makes it out in a page and gets first shown, execute this event handler. And what it actually does, if you see, it basically constructs a bar chart and calls the draw method that we defined above, and then adds this to the screen, or the actual page that we are in. And the way it does that is with this, taking the element. So the first thing you note, or you note, is that we construct the div node, attach in an imperative way. This is what the exclamation point is supposed to signal. You can take it without the exclamation point, and you can have these chained things set up if you want, and then returning a new div node, which is exactly the same as the one you added an event handler to, but it's one with an event handler. So that's the functional version, which typically ends up being not that very useful. So there's this imperative version of that operator that actually just takes your div node or whatever node you have and just adds, in this case, an event handler, and returns the changed or updated div node. So at the very end, we catch that element, which now has this event handler attached to it, and we take the element and just simply append to this entry point, which is basically a div with an ID in the markup. So if you read the instructions, what it actually says is that first you have to, well, I'll show this in CloudSharper, but you have to put this placeholder. This is where in the markup template, the dynamic functionality for this whole bar chart thing will pop up at that div node. So what I actually did, and I think maybe this would be a good idea to start actually with CloudSharper, is that I'll skip through this. We'll come back to this. There's a link right there. If you go to that, and preferably please on a Windows machine, and I'll circulate these slides so you will have them. I guess in the Hangouts, people will be able to watch the video streaming later on. So that link, I think, is a valid link. So if you do that, it will basically direct you to CloudSharper. If you're not logged on at that very moment, it will ask you to either sign up or log in. And once you had performed those, it will drop you into this newly created workspace and populate it with basically this whole sample from the website. So this is a 2-minute example from the WebSharper website. And if I actually had done that, which I am here in CloudSharper, let me log in as myself. And before we even go on, let me explain the modes of operation of CloudSharper, and for that just switch over back here. So we were right here. So it's an integrated IDE. It has basically any capability for any language. So it's kind of language neutral. We have the basic, syntax highlighting and whatever support for like dozens of languages included. So that's not the big deal. The big deal is that actually for F# we give you all the code assistance features as well, including code completion, semantic or type checking, and stuff like that. So you get that for free basically. And we have some other work. Well, this slide says C# that may be coming, maybe not. We'll see about that. But there's a whole bunch of other plans we definitely have for this to give you a more type-safe experience, maybe in other languages, not just F#. But right now it's F# centered. And as we grow out of CloudSharper being an IDE only, that whole idea, you will see more different and diverse things coming up with relationship to CloudSharper. And one might be different languages or maybe different ways of programming. And there's a whole bunch of interesting things there. All right, so I think I explained this. We have on-the-fly type checking, and we have integration with different type providers and data and visualization and charting and all that. We have a REPL, and you have multi-project solutions. So you can have a project that has 15 or a solution that has 15 projects inside. We can readily cope with that in CloudSharper. In fact, we have edited CloudSharper in CloudSharper as well, which is a big bootstrap step. And trust me, first time we tried it, it took like, I don't know, 6 gigabytes of memory or something like that. Just it wasn't exactly good for that. So this is the link I shared. So now I'm going to switch back to actually CloudSharper. So now I logged in, if you have seen it. And I have the local component running. In case you don't, you might see something like this. As soon as I basically hit this, it would come back to me and say, hey, you don't have this thing running. So if you go back, and I have a little bit slow on the network here, but hopefully I should see this page coming up. So you will probably be greeted with that kind of a red mark on the top that says, hey, you know what, I tried to get your workspaces. Yeah, there you go. Which happens all the time. You guys can't imagine how many emails we got that, hey, I tried to do something in CloudSharper and I got this message. What the heck do I do? Yeah, so here's the unclear instruction. This is most likely due to the fact that you are not running CloudSharper local. If you don't have it installed, follow the instructions below, and then click the retry button. So
yeah, just don't make it red.
Yeah. How do I run the component? I installed it. But
so you install, okay, so that does need explanation, sorry. So what I typically do is searching for CloudSharper. And there's a thing called cloudsharper.services. We have to document this better on the website. And if you installed it on an operating system other than Windows 8, you actually can find it in the program files menu, and you know, the thing that used to pop up in Windows 7.
Are we allowed to ask questions as you go?
Yes, I'll try to repeat.
Is this for FSI?
What is?
The message workspace. Like, if you don't have the service locally and you're using the cloud, can you use a REPL?
If you, okay, so before I answer that question, let me go on and actually clarify what the local component does and scenarios when you don't need it. And then I answer the FSI. Hey, see, she has it running.
Works.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I started the local server. It typically starts itself, but if you, in case you need to stop it or start it, you can do that here. Clear the log and whatever. There's going to be a lot of stuff added here, so you can even track the memory and CPU and resource utilization of the processes you're doing with this particular mini cloud here. It's doing more than FSI. FSI is just one little process it manages. It otherwise does a whole bunch of other things. So I started it, and I go retry, and now it says, hey, you have a bunch of workspaces within this account. And now I think I need to explain. So I am now running the local component, which is a mini cloud version of CloudSharper running on my machine. Everything I do in this particular mode of operation, it's on my machine. All my files are on my machine. Type checking is on my machine. FSI is on my machine. Everything is on my machine. You will not have to ask the question, hey, do you guys actually get to see my code? We don't get to see anybody's code. Your code is on your machine. However, there is the inconvenience, which probably, as you observed, is not that big of an inconvenience, is that you do have to install this component. It takes about 5 seconds to download, another couple seconds to actually install, plus maybe 14 seconds to discover how to run it. Once you're through that, in about a minute's time, you can actually get working. So this is what's happening here.
So you're saying like the default would be to be in the cloud, but like in case you don't want to have your data
yes.
visible in the cloud, you can run everything.
The first thing we implemented is the cloud version of CloudSharper. And then we were like, okay, well, who is going to pay like $50 even to try out an online ID just so that they can have a cloud-hosted virtual machine that will run all this for them? And we thought, hey, I can already see a bunch of people saying, hey, we want to run this locally, can we? So we figured that before we even get into the pricing model, it would be a good idea just to say, hey, you don't have to worry about pricing. You don't have to worry about is it free or not, because this will always be free. if you run stuff on your machine, yeah, you're using our ID, but whatever. It's your machine doing all the work, so you get to do it for free. So this is why we wanted to do it. We wanted to give this out. And the second mode of operation, the actual cloud mode of operation, is something that we have upcoming. So that will allow people to actually log in and not have to install anything. They can access all their shared workspaces, or just workspaces, private or public. You can make workspaces public, but by default, all the workspaces are private. So in case you wondered, hey, do other people get to see what I'm working on right now, even if I'm on the cloud? No, they don't, unless you share it with people. So here you see that there's this section here that says shared, like on this side of the page. And it talks about workspaces, well, soon, templates, soon. This means you will be able to share your stuff that you're working on. I just shared with you guys through a URL this Google visualization application. You can share with similar URLs your own projects. And the nice thing is that you can also share templates. You can install templates from yourself, from somebody else, or whoever, and people will get to see how to use those templates just in a second. So anyway, this is now in CloudSharper. I'm running in local mode. I think Matt had a question about FSI. And what was the question again?
Oh, if it was local mode.
It is local in the local mode of operation. And we don't have another mode of operation at the moment because the cloud one is coming. And by the way, if anybody wants to, like, you know, after the talk, maybe you guys don't remember what I said or whatever, you can always go to CloudSharper, and there's this block here, and you see that we have these releases like once or twice a week, and I blogged about a month ago about the upcoming CloudSharper features within this quarter. And actually, this might be a good idea to go through. So we will have group sessions and extension API and so on. What do these mean? So once you get a good feeling of what CloudSharper can do, these will mean a lot to you. So I'm not going to go through them. I think we will save this for the last, and then we get back to this and say, okay, now I understand what a group session is, or why is it needed, when will it be available? Well, according to this blog, it's going to be soon. And then you will understand what a group session is, what is an extension API. I think you will be, most of you will be most interested in that. How do you do cloud sharing of workspaces? And then how do you have a whole fully cloud-hosted backend? These are all things coming up. But now back to CloudSharper. So here I am. If you actually check that link, you probably had managed to clone that workspace that I had, and you would probably see something like this. So I'm not going to go to the basics. Everybody knows how to use an ID. They say that if you have a UI and you need to explain your UI to other people, it's not a good UI. Hey Ryan, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
And we just heard my voice echoed back here, so maybe you guys might want to turn down the mic.
Yeah, Matthias just joined and I just muted him.
Okay.
It's your fault.
So I'm going to try to make this a bit bigger. So how is that? So something like this. Maybe that's too big. And so note that when we came in, and I think maybe just this might just be worth a small explanation. So we have a solution view, we have a file system view. Oftentimes you actually don't want to be in a solution view because you want to see things that were generated, things that are not added into your project as a formal artifact. You can find them in the file system view. So what I see here is I have a bundle project, and it has probably a packages config file. Indeed it does. You open it, and you can see that it has two dependencies, one on WebShopper and one on WebShopper visualization, or Google visualization, which were fetched automatically for you right here. These are obtained from NuGet immediately. If you say, hey, I made some changes into packages config, you right-click and you say restore packages. This is going to go out and restore the packages again. And as you've probably seen in the bottom, it said, hey, they are all there. So there's nothing to restore. So a convenient function would be, hey, I want to get a different version of this particular NuGet package, and you get it instantly. Another way of doing that is going back to the solution view. Here's my project. This is an F# project. You can right-click here and you can say, I want to manage packages. I want to manage dependencies. and so on and so on. And because I blew up my screen, this is not very nice. But so the NuGet package manager would be, so this was references, here's managing the packages. And again, this window doesn't fit my resized thing, so it actually get resized. But I can search for NuGet packages, I can install them, I can see their properties, etc. This is almost like in Visual Studio. And then this file would be added, the automatic change detection would pick up that change, and it would start the NuGet restore process. It would restore immediately, and within a couple seconds you have the new stuff right in your file system ready to be used. And the reference is added to your project. It's kind of like visually managing all these NuGet dependencies and others. Okay, so what is this project about? It's a bundle project. Everybody saw the 6 steps on the WebSharper site. How do you get to this project? I'm not going to explain. You can basically do a build. That's Control B. And you see down there, there's a build, and boom, we have a green line that usually means something good. And then you start this. What we do is we start an OWIN container. I'm not sure how many of you guys have heard about OWIN. I know Ryan has. So we start a built-in web server that can host WebSharper sitelets, and then we just basically dump the application you're working on in this ID for that into that OWIN container, and it runs here. So I can actually make changes to the URL here, and you can refresh the page, etc. So let me show you one little shortcut. So because this is a project that is entirely HTML and JavaScript that was generated on the fly, I can actually go in and open this index.html. This is my document. I can see it in document view rendered that, hey, this is the app. I can go and edit the source. I can say, hey, well, you know what? Let's add the header here, hello world. And I save it. I switch back to my document view, and there it is. I can even do split view if I want, which actually is a nice and convenient way of doing things. I edit here, and I save, and boom, there you go. And remember, if I want to change the actual code for the F# one, I go into my solution and I go, hey, give me the client-side code of this. It's the 40 lines that we saw from the WebSharper site to 10 times as much, one of the figures. We then suddenly do another build. So I'm just going to show you what it actually does. So this executes the F# compiler, this executes WebSharper. We just generated a bunch of files. In fact, this file has been now overwritten, so I can just refresh. As you see, we just skewed these numbers because I made 2006 extremely large, so that just skewed all the other numbers. But this was a dynamic thing. I just changed F# code to make an update to the application. Okay, so a couple shortcuts. If you click Alt-1, Alt-2, or Alt-3, you can switch between the dashboard view, the ID view, and the actual deployment view. The deployment view is often useful if you want to have an application constrained to a smaller real estate. Like in this case, I want to have a tablet that has this and this particular resolution. I can change that, and then this application under development is not going to be able to exceed the boundaries of that resolution. And this is kind of useful sometimes to, test mobile applications and the like. Okay, so again, I push Alt-2, boom, I'm back into the ID. I can do all kinds of stuff here. Maybe what we should do actually is, let me just create another little project here. So, first project. I'm doing that from the dashboard. So this just killed my Google visualization sample that I was working on. It gave me an empty workspace. By default, if you have no README in your workspace in the root, we open a default CloudSharper welcoming message. So this is welcome to CloudSharper. You should read this because this explains what is a solution, what is a workspace, how do you create a project, and all these things. Like you can click here. Like see, it says something about, hey, this provides a number of templates. You just go into the menu and do this. You click this, and it will show you exactly the same window. Again, because of my resolution, it looks kind of weird. It explains about building. We have 2 build systems built into this. You can build with MS Build. Your projects actually travel in between Visual Studio. Haven't checked Xamarin Studio myself, but probably that too, and CloudSharper. So you can edit back and forth. You can take all this code, put it into Visual Studio, it will run. Make changes there, you plug it back in here, it will run. So the project's actually traveling between the two. There's another thing we started building, but we kind of stopped. Was something called IntelliFactory.build. This was like an attempt to actually like abstract away some of the MS Build artifacts and handling cross-platform F# projects. It's actually a quite nice build system. You guys may want to check it out. It's still integrated, but it's not something that the templates actually. Well, I know the templates actually still use them. So you might get away with actually building using IntelliFactory build. Deployment, I just showed you. You can deploy locally. We have support for WebShopper sitelets. We even support App Harbor deployment. And then here's the interactive window. So getting back to Matt's question here. So where is interactive? Well, first of all, you can find it under View and say, give me interactive. That's one way. But if you notice the shortcut Control-Alt-F, you can just click that, and there's my interactive window. And by default, it doesn't have anything. So we have to say, hey, do something. And then it says, OK, I'm lazily starting. So it's going to take a few seconds to actually boot off FSI. It loads a bunch of customizations into FSI. And now it's ready to say 1 + 1 is 2. And then at this point, you can basically say the same thing again. You can edit multi-line inputs and so on and so on. So once you have this, you can hide it away. You just minimize it or hit escape. And then maybe go through some of these samples. So it explains a little bit. First of all, you can type into that FSI anything that you can type into normal FSI, and you get the same thing. You can define functions, you can pass values, call functions, whatever. It's all there. You will get the same output that you would get in normal FSI. However, because this is a web IDE, it kind of makes sense to actually be able to talk to web stuff like JavaScript libraries. Maybe I want to contact a web service. Maybe I want to fetch data, etc. So what we have is integration, close integration with WebSharper, the web framework I showed you guys. So with WebSharper, here's 2 lines. This is WebSharper code. To actually, what we see here is this button is an HTML combinator. It gives me a button. The title of it will be click me. Here's our friend, the dirty imperative event attaching. And then we're saying, hey, pick up the click event handler and assign that function to it. And simply just do a JavaScript alert. So what I can do is I can send this little snippet to interactive. And now my little window comes back. This thing gets churned. And then boom, I have a little button. And if I click, there's my JavaScript thing. So we can take this to the extreme. I could develop a mobile application right here interactively by making little snippets and putting them together, and then I have larger stuff that I'm typing here, and you get to try that. And actually, let me show how that works. So taking it a bit further, we can have charting. So here's I don't know how much you can see, about a dozen lines of charting. This actually combines 2 charts, a line chart and a column chart. Both with some info and legend, and then you simply just pipe it into interactive and say send it to interactive, and there is our chart. And what else? Okay, so this is the welcome tab. I think people should read this before they do anything, and if they do read it, they have probably 99% of the initial questions answered. In case you haven't exhausted your questions, there's a documentation little section on the left-hand side from API references. A lot of people are like, hey, yeah, your documentation is nice, but can I have the API reference? And you go, well, okay. You want to have a reference to, I don't know, the F# standard library? Now you have it. Oh, F# control. Let's open that up. What's an async? Well, what's an async? Let's go in here. And then you can have all the documentation right there. And it's pretty formatted, so it fits the F# coding conventions. It doesn't give you this crazy .NET looking type. It gives you the pretty printed F# one. So as you can see, it's actually quite nice. So we did this for the entire standard library for the F# environment, and most of WebSharper and most of the extensions for WebSharper. So this only has a few, but they will be coming up. And there's CloudSharper extensibility, explaining what kind of stuff you can do with the extensions. I'll show those first, and then you'll better understand. But if you go to the Getting Started tree there, I just did Welcome to CloudSharper. You can learn about some of these shortcuts. actually most of them are not even listed here. You can learn about the notification system, what happens when you do stuff and you see, hey, this thing actually makes some, has some particular service here. Now it says the service is not connected. That's because I have a workspace that doesn't have anything. So it doesn't have an F# project. So why the heck would it start the code service? So it doesn't. That's what I see here, but that's a warning. It's a blue thing there. Everything else is green, so everything should be okay. And you learn about building projects with if build, la la la. And here's the same document again, doing charting with interactively. So maybe here's another chart. You should learn these and go through this document and actually get a pretty solid idea about what you can do, just accessing data and things like that. So that's yet another chart. And my favorite snippet is this interactive web programming snippet. It explains this tight integration between CloudSharper and WebSharper and all the things you can do. So basically from creating little div nodes on the fly to attaching event handlers like we just did, working with client-side functions. So you can define functions within FSI that gets executed as JavaScript code. So you simply have to put JavaScript on the top. You can then trigger those and so on, and then maybe some problems you run into are explained why you're running into those problems. And then here's like a 15-line little snippet. This is what you would probably end up with if you spent a little time experimenting with, you know, like, hey, here's something, let's add an event handler to it, and then you grow up this small snippet into something large, and then you end up with something like this snippet here. We just wanted to give you sort of a quick, hey, you can also do something like this within interactive. This is drawing on an HTML5 canvas with your mouse, so I send this to interactive. And by default, it generates a 500 by 500 thing, and so that you actually don't see the whole thing. But I can draw, and I can make little drawings. And if you study the source code, well, first of all, you can make changes. I can make this smaller. I can bring back the entire. And there you have it. So this is interactive web development. You can interactively develop the little snippet, and you can also experiment with these snippets on the fly. You write F#, you get JavaScript, you get HTML, etc. Okay.
And the benefit here, maybe for people who don't know WebSharper too, is like they do write it in F#, so they you actually don't have all the words in JavaScript. Is that fair?
Right. I mean, I don't want to see JavaScript really. I mean, I don't even know really how to program in JavaScript, and I spent several years doing web applications. That's because we didn't have to, because we had WebSharper. And a lot of WebSharper came about as a need to eliminate the need for writing JavaScript code. So here we didn't really demonstrate anything about like, hey, I have a JavaScript library. Can I talk to it? Can I put it into my F# interactive? Can I write a project with it, etc.? I think I addressed some of that in this workspace that I shared with you, the 2-minute example. So let me switch back to that. Note that it keeps all my documentations and everything, and it opens the README for me. So I have this README explains what I did actually, even tells you how to do it from scratch if you wanted. And you can say, well, you know what? Let's kill all the documentation, and we have this file. So we just deploy whatever we had. Because I built it already, this should just pop up as before. So I just switched out from one workspace to another. In fact, let's keep moving. Let's switch out to another one. So one thing that in the title of the presentation I kind of talk about, or in the description of the presentation, I talk about how you can actually take F# to other people who don't necessarily know F#. These could be students, these could be people you hired in your company, these could be people that are, I don't know, taking a university course on F# or functional web development or something that is related to functional programming and or F#. So I actually ran a summer school, a couple classes in a summer school, like 2 times 45-minute short sessions about F# and about functional programming basics. So I actually have a workspace, which I just switched to right now, which has, I'm not going to go through this, that's not the point. The point is how you can actually develop these kinds of rich but interactive training materials, if you will. I mean, if you zoom up, you see that I can actually switch here, and well, not with that kind of a screen resolution. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. So, okay, now we totally messed everything up.
Can I ask something?
Yes, please do.
Okay, before this session, I didn't know anything about F#. If I'm looking at this stuff from CloudSharper, how similar is this to what I would be doing if I were programming in F# without CloudSharper?
This would exactly be the same.
It's exactly the same syntax.
You can plug this into Visual Studio, and the same thing just works.
Okay. I just saw you had those libraries in the beginning, so I was wondering what was from the libraries and what
so
was
if you're doing web stuff in CloudSharper, like here you're making an HTML5 canvas.
Mm-hmm.
That is with WebSharper. So all the libraries, the opens we had on the top, actually those are auto open, so I never need to open them specifically in this particular FSI. But if you did that in FSI, or if you did that in Visual Studio, you would need to create a WebSharper project type, probably add exactly the same code, and you would get it working. In fact, that's the explanation we have on the WebSharper side, how to get things running in Visual Studio.
Mm-hmm.
But now I just showed you, hey, or instead of doing all those 6 steps, click here and you get the whole thing, the same thing running in CloudSharper, which we are hoping to lower the entrance barrier for people trying to check out, like WebSharper or F# programming, and giving them this awesome ability to just jump into a project straight with a single click. You can make changes immediately, you can recompile, and there you have it. You don't have to worry about, hey, how do I do this? Do I have to install this in Visual Studio? Or how about WebSharper? What is WebSharper? And all these questions. They are just sort of pumped right in here, and you don't have to really worry about it. So if you want to do the same things, you can. The code would look exactly the same, but you would need WebSharper, for example. Sorry? The server can be run on local intranet. Yes, that is one thing I want to discuss at the end. Yeah, let me just keep that to the end. Yeah, please do.
There is one which is initially you mentioned C# as another possible language. What other languages have been considered? JavaScript, TypeScript, OCaml, other things? So
first of all, because the integration into the so CloudSharper provides an API for extension, so extensibility API as we call it. Mm-hmm. So through that API, you can plug in support for new languages. You can plug in visual editors like Visivig, drag and drop, etc., etc. You can add support for different file types. Like if you open a PNG, it should come up not as a PNG but as an editor that allows you to make edits in the PNG. So we have custom editors, we have custom renderers, we have different extensibility points. You can add menu items, you can remove stuff from menus, you can remove functionality from the IDE itself. I can make CloudSharper with an extension. I can make it like, I don't know, an application that is, you wouldn't be able to tell that it's for developers. I can make it an HR application if I wanted, and then somebody could do HR here instead of programming. But if I log in as a programmer, I can actually change the code that the other people see, and then they will see my update as I roll it out. So it's extremely capable, and it's all possible because we are on the web and we can have access to all these web technologies, all the JavaScript libraries, and they plug directly in. So, yeah, you had another question too.
I think for the questions though is like one of them was about the compiler, because like the thing you described are really more. I'm assuming that you have things like auto-completion and things like that. I'm assuming you're using your own version of the F# compiler, and that if I wanted to do something crazy like that with another language, could I do that? Or like,
So, what you see, well, we haven't seen. Okay, so let's just see the support for F#. So let me switch to.
I guess this implicit question is like, I'm assuming there is a prime, like F# is really first-class citizen, and the others will have a harder time to integrate with the same level of support.
Yeah, so what I did here, I haven't even showed you guys because we were just swiping through the different samples here. What I haven't showed you is what we actually do for F#. So here's an F# code. I'm not sure how much you can actually see. So this touch thing is just terrible.
The screen you have?
Yeah, not just the screen. This whole idea of a touch inside Chrome. It's just Chrome is just not made for this.
Oh yeah, we do it on the Mac, or you do it on certain messes it up. Yeah.
So I kill these ones. Actually, let's do clean. So when you have, so you guys probably have seen that some people initially had some problems with, hey, how do I do a web application in F#? And then I think Dan Moe came up with the fix that fixed the F# project type so it can be also a web application project. And therefore you can have the whole thing. You don't need a C# host project anymore. You can have an F# web application project. So this is that project type. So if, oh good. Sorry, I shouldn't be zooming in and out. Hopefully the people watching online, they can see what I see. And the people here, we just have to be a bit more careful here. No. So we don't want to move files. So that's one thing that you can do is you can highlight files and move them around, and that's pretty dangerous too. If you make some bad moves, you can move things around that you didn't want to. But so anyway, so let me open up client and zoom this up a bit. So if I'm here, I just changed some lines, I immediately broke the code. So as you would expect, we get these red squigglies, and I can't scroll on the other side. You should see a little sidebar there that actually summarizes all my messages, these things. You should tell Microsoft about this touch screen stuff. It's really, really crappy. So you get these things, and then you can switch to in the IntelliSense, and then you can actually like click to different places, just like in Visual Studio, and it takes you to the places that are broken. And then you go, hey, well, let's fix this. So you get code completion. The only thing you can complete to is visualization. Once you complete to that, then all the error messages go away. So that's like in Visual Studio. And the question is, how did we do it? Well, indeed, at some earlier stage, or up until some earlier stage, we had to fork the compiler, and we had to make some dramatic changes to the compiler itself because we didn't have the F# code service package. But since then, so this was like, let's say, a year ago. Since then, we actually do use FCS. So the people doing work on FCS are awesome, and they are much better fixing things in how compiler service should be exposed than us. So we actually threw out our customizations. We contributed some, and we switched to FCS. So now any change that people make on FCS to improve the compiler service, the error message, or the reporting, or anything else, will benefit from those in CloudSharper. Yes?
Question, I know you use a lot of keyboard commands in your program, and some of these are very similar to maybe if I use ReSharper. How do you handle collisions between those two applications?
So on a very, very basic. So the question, in case you haven't heard, how do we handle screen shortcuts, and what do we do about collisions? So talking about handling, so we have the ability to switch shortcuts off. Few people requested that, hey, it doesn't really work well with my key bindings because they use some particular set. I think that's great. So we allow to actually turn everything off. That is not available, but that's something that in the full solution we would like to be able to do and offer. So you should have a dialog here that says, here are all the things you can do with the key, with key shortcuts, and here are the key shortcuts assigned to them, and if you want to change them, you can. So that's actually not that difficult. So that may be just, we'll see that maybe in a couple of weeks, maybe not, depending on the priorities. But it's something that we are envisioning at the moment. So you should be able to do a lot of other customizations, including shortcut handling. Yes.
I have another question, which is, so I heard you talk about CloudSharper a while back, and the reason I was interested was maybe not as a developer, but as a data scientist. Mm-hmm. And it looks like it could be something which, especially you can customize it, where you could do something very similar to Python notebooks, mm-hmm. or stuff like that, and maybe have a team and share documents. Yeah. I was wondering if this is something you had in mind, or like how do you think this stack is?
It certainly is. In fact, let's switch back to this last section in the documentation. So we covered everything until interactive web programming. So the last one here is using external libraries in FSI. So you bring this up, and it talks about like how can you actually like load some stuff into your FSI? Can I reference other libraries? Can I reference my machine learning library, the F# data library? etc. So this explains how you can do like basic things like hash R, and including like a path to a DLL that you want to add into your FSI. And then you also have support for NuGet. So in FSI, you can do something like NuGet.install package, and then in the next line you can say, now I installed this, let's reference it, and I just brought in jQuery Mobile into FSI with those two lines. So there is ready NuGet package integration, and you can also reference packages. Okay, so here's a complete example at the end. That's all the examples. So what we see here is basically like 15 lines. What do? We install F# data. We reference it. We pick up the World Bank data context. We pick some countries, and for each we do tertiary school enrollment percentages, and then we map them on a line chart from whatever we have data from, probably like 20 years ago or whatever, and then we just put that on a chart. So if I pump this back into F# Interactive, note that we had restarted or switched in and out from different workspaces. Every time you do that, you kill FSI, because FSI may have some artifacts pending or locked from within the workspace you're working in. So if you switch workspaces, you have to shut down FSI. And that means it has to be actually restarted next time you actually run it. And you may get some quirks, you know. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work. You have to go back to the local component and you have to start it. Like in this case, I guarantee you. So now there's a little bit of a delay because we are talking to the World Bank database, and it may be slow.
Question.
God knows. Yes.
So will FSI in CloudSharper lock things other than reference files? So, or only lock reference files?
Well, FSI will only lock the things that you're locking, so only references. Let me load this up again. This will complain if I load it again about trying to execute. Do this. Has to work. So this is fetching NuGet. It will definitely be overridden. Now, see, it didn't even get that far. So now it's compiling, you know, the type provider for the World Bank database, which fetches the scheme of the World Bank database. It gets all this dynamic information, compiles it into dynamic assembly, and then we use the dynamic assembly to fetch the data, and then there we go, we have the data and we visualize it. So this is 3 countries, United Kingdom, United States, and France, and their tertiary, so college and university level enrollment in percentages mapped from 1970 to 2013. It's not data science, not machine learning, but that's another level I can add on the top of this. Remember, I only wrote 10 lines. So maybe if I write 20 lines, I'm doing machine learning and figuring out which country will be the next superpower, brain superpower, because they have so many people going to universities.
You can share it with your team and give a script which is replicable to somebody else.
So first of all, the script that I'm executing here in FSI, I will lead to that question in a sec. I can actually put this in a workspace, and I can create a document like this. This is a document in the workspace. I can see the source. Look, here's the source. I can see it in split view, so I can actually edit it. And as I edit, look at this. Boom, it's like, whew. I can do scientific computing right here, and I type Markdown, and I get immediately the feedback. So you can put your stuff like this, and then just share the workspace via URL. But we are doing something even cooler than that. So here's FSI. And what I would like to be able to see, if I was some user of CloudSharper, I would want to, well, first of all, there's a bunch of stuff here that you can do. You can interrupt in case you do some weird script that actually doesn't interrupt. You can interrupt yourself, just stop the whole thing. But anyway, let's not get into that. So what you want to do is that I may want to take this entire transcript that I've been doing here, and I've been doing a lot of stuff. Now, wouldn't it be nice if there was a button on the top that said extract all my session in a shareable manner? So I can give a URL to Matthias. He could come in here. He would not be able to change this unless you share it as a writable artifact. But he could play with my little snippet here. Or he could maybe actually see some interactivity with some of the charts. And by the way, these charts are interactive, believe it or not. So you can turn parts off and on. You can even highlight like which part is which. If you had more interesting things on this chart, you could actually see that as a useful utility. But why can't Matthias play with something like this? Why does he have to redo the same computation as I've already done? So there you go. That's something that we are doing at the moment. And there will be a way to actually save this as a notebook, as we call it.
So you could give me your session and I could then take it and work with it and do something different?
Yes, it will be reduplicated on your machine, and the same things, snippets and everything will work exactly like what I see here, but it will be your copy cloned from my copy. It's not working on the same copy, two of us. That's something that we could also do at some point, but not right now. It's not the highest priority.
Then you tell me maybe when I'm asking too many questions and not letting you talk enough, but I can curse then about version control and the file control.
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, how do we get into version control? So when you have a workspace, the typical way, of course, is let's say to start with a new workspace. So we had already created this first project that is empty. So let me switch back to that. So the documentation we can close down. So as you notice, there's nothing in the workspace, and in the file system, there's a solution file automatically generated for you. So if I add the project, it will be added to the, in fact, let's add the project. Let's add a jQuery mobile application. Well, that's a pretty big start project, but whatever. So I just dumped a jQuery mobile project into my workspace. So what this is doing is fetching the template from the website, from the main CloudSharper server, and it just fetched it. And because it has a NuGet package restore or a NuGet package config file, it started doing the package restore. And at this point, we're done. I can just do a build. And let's hope that it works. There's always surprises, but it should work. And remember, we talked about sharing not only your workspaces, but imagine sharing a template. Let's say Matthias or Stefan or anybody else in the community who actually does something that could lead into a template for others to use, like a machine learning template. You could publish that not as a workspace, but as a template, and then people, if you plug that into the right organization, people can go here, a new project, and then see the template. And there is a very sophisticated hierarchical structure here that we implemented for between user accounts, because we haven't talked about this, but the enterprise users who have a company in which there are different roles of developers and roles of people, you may want to share in between those people only, not affecting anybody else in the world. Well, you can do that because a little subset can be created inside CloudSharper for your organization. In fact, we can take CloudSharper and install it on your premises if you want, and have all kinds of benefits from that. But let's just leave that as an open-ended thing. So I compiled. Yeah, there we go. So I do a deployment. Deployment is Control D, by the way, in case you're wondering. So I do a Control B and then Control D. Control D detects, deployment detects what kind of application you're likely going to be doing. Is it a sitelet or is it an HTML application? In this case, it correctly inferred that it's an HTML application. This little feature here comes handy that allows me to make it look kind of like a mobile application. I don't know what we should actually choose. Maybe like this. Yeah. And then here's this little thing. I can flip in between. I'm using my finger now. So there is a little bug here, if you can see. So there are supposed to be two buttons on the top. One goes to the left, one goes to the right, and they are kind of overlapping each other. And let's say I noticed this. I noticed this yesterday, by the way. And I was like, shit, what's going on? So it turns out that jQuery mobile has been updated. And a quick fix for that is when you go to the code, the source code of this application, some left and then another button right. We have the text title of whatever application or whatever page we are on. So a quick fix would be, actually insert another data attribute. I think they call it inline, and just set that to true. And then do it on both places. Wait, where am I? Yeah, so we're gonna paste it here too. So then I do a rebuild. So I invoke the build. Keyboard shortcuts do give you an edge. I have to say I can be more productive than in Visual Studio if I use keyboard shortcuts here. And the ability to switch in and out of workspaces is fantastic. I don't wait ever. So it just compiled with F#. It's compiling with WebSharper, and probably we didn't open it up. I guess we could just, once this compiles, we could switch back to the deployment view. So this is a fairly large application. It's like 150 lines. So it's as a WebSharper app, it's almost like a usable application. So you can really customize this. So I bet if we refresh this, no wait, we really need to refresh. Maybe I have to stop the deployment. Let me just do one thing. Let's do the deployment again. So you can always take this URL, by the way, and paste it on another tab if you want to really work with it and debug the code, etc. Because right now, because this thing is in a frame, in the whole ID project, it makes it kind of hard to debug. So you want to take this whole path here, you paste it in a new tab, you get that. So, no, it didn't fix it. Okay, maybe it's a different thing. It should really fix it. I thought that fixed it, but okay, I may be wrong. So anyway, so this is a little not so attractive application because it uses jQuery mobile. So let me show some other ones. So I'm gonna switch out of this and I'm gonna go into our next thing, which is this, maybe get gas. So again, I opened it. It's doing a package restore. It restored. It loads the project. It appears in my solution view, and at that point, I'm ready to go. I have code completion, everything on this particular project. I do a build. And this is a fairly large project, but it's a all-client application. It's a map mobile application that is supposed to give you the gas stations around you, but these are alternate gas stations. So using like a biofuel and stuff like that. So it's generating the DLL for me. Sometimes we noticed it might actually be worthwhile to shut down the server and restart. I'm not going to do that because I'm in a compilation now. But there's something sometimes happening about not cleaning up resources yet. So we're working on fixing that up. But it compiled okay. So I'm going to do a deploy. Control D again. And remember, this doesn't look good on anything but full page. So here's my little application. And it's fetching the gas stations. And God knows how long that's going to take. Maybe a few seconds. It depends on the internet. But once we have it, yeah.
Sorry.
You are actually using it from a Mac.
Yeah. Actually, there's a problem though because I can't get IntelliFactory. But it's funny because when I look at index.html, it's here.
Yeah. So you compiled actually, and it worked.
Yeah, I compiled and it worked, but it's complaining that it doesn't know what IntelliFactory is.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't know now because you're disconnected.
Oh, okay.
So here's our app. It loaded up all the little alternate gas stations, and depending on where you zoom, it actually loads. You can say, hey, what's the address of this? Boom, there's the address. So not too big, whatever. But this shows you how you actually combine. In this case, this is actually on Phone.js, which is a JavaScript library. And if you look in the source code, there's only one file, client.fs. This is the whole source code. How big is this? It's fairly big, 240 lines.
Is it a web application for phone or just file?
No, it's a web-based mobile application, yes. So it's doing some crazy stuff here. I mean, we have some abstractions. This is why it's longer than 100 lines. So we are actually formal about what is a station, what kind of stuff does it have. We handle asynchronous calls, so we kind of wait for the asynchronous thing. We do some computations to figure out what are the gas stations closest to you. We have some event handlers, and then we just add locations onto a map, and then we show them. And I guess we have 75 gas stations added to the map. And this is actually the code here. In a div, we are adding a map. So this is my placeholder. and we are adding a Bing map, setting it onto the div element, add the event handler about the moving in and out, and then simply just have the whole thing expressed. And then at the end, we take this and append it. I can't show it because it doesn't go down, but we append it using, this actually uses AngularJS underneath, but as a WebSharper stuff, so this is what it looks like. Again, if I had done this application, I didn't, one of our colleagues prepared it, I would have probably used UI next, because why would we need Angular? But Angular works just as fine. So if you go here, you see, oh, so not Angular, we use Knockout and Phone.js. So in this case, the MVC came from these. You actually probably don't need the TypeScript, the dependency that you saw there. But it's only in one file, and it's a web application exposed from the generated JavaScript and HTML files that we actually output here. So all the stuff is going to be under content, and you get this mobile HTML file or index.html for your application. So if you open this, you will see the same thing. You can view it in document view, and you can view it in split view. There's your application running. Now you probably need a bigger real estate than what I have, but it's right here. It's running right there. So how much time do we have? Probably not much more. Let me show another example. A lot of people have been asking about Win.js. You know, those Metro style applications that you could write natively and using JavaScript.
So we can then just curious about UI next.
I'll show UI next, just in a minute. So, okay, so I just loaded up this other project. And by the way, I don't know what we have here. Okay, so here's CloudSharper. When you go to home, you probably notice that it's pretty empty. There's this big line here that separates the footer and this cloud. That's the line that will be expanded to a big section about here are all the projects that you can try as a newcomer to CloudSharper. There's going to be an introduction to functional programming, introduction to F#, introduction to web programming, reactive functional web development, phone applications using Phone.js, Win.js, etc. So you will have all those templates that I'm showing now, probably in a week or two. You will have all of those published. But we have a few issues to have to deal with, because we have a Bing map key that belongs to our organization. Should that be in the template? If it's not, how do you go around that? So we have a few other things like that, but all of these samples I could just share right now. But I think I would prefer that you guys will fetch it from the website.
You know, you get a bar across that says that you can't do this. It's not licensed. So we should be able to run the template.
Yeah, and that's probably what we'll end up doing. But anyway, I just wanted to point out that, yeah, this looks kind of empty. We even had a few people requesting that we put up, like, okay, before I sign up, what do I get? Well, now you get at least you get a screenshot of what it looks like, but nothing tells you that you get full NuGet support, you get multi-project solutions, you get type checking, etc. So we'll have a couple nice pages that actually line these out, and you will be able to take advantage of them. But okay, so we actually I just opened another project, right? So let me compile this. And this is now Win.js. And you may ask, how do we do Win.js? Well, there's that big JavaScript library called Win.js, which has all these Windows-based abstractions and makes you able to write web applications that look like Windows applications. And in this case, it probably looks, you can probably tell the style, it looks very Windows Phone-ish. So I can do stuff like give me a new item, buy milk, whatever, you save it, boom, it's saved. And now here's buy stuff, you can add another one.
Question?
Yes?
You seem to be using the older version of the API for Windows.
For Win.js?
You're not using your universal app for.
Well, this is the styling. Don't let it confuse. I think we're using 3.0. Is that the newest one? This is 3.0. So TypeScript, well, all versions. Not gonna tell you what it is, but I think maybe the NuGet package management actually has some info on what we have installed. So Win.js, it can't find the package info because it's on our private WebSharper support feed, as you probably know. So let me just show you what you can and can't do out of the box for free or whatever. So I think I can't emphasize enough that if you are really serious about web development or mobile web development, you should be using something like WebSharper. And just to tell you that there's a whole bunch of extensions that we actually don't just take TypeScript files and then just dump them into extensions for WebSharper. These are proven and tested and supported extensions. So WinJS is not even shown here. There's like probably another dozen that we need to list here. But it gives you the idea that some of these are premium, some of them are private, and some of them are open source. So you actually can learn from, oh, here's GL Matrix. That's a 2D and 3D graphics and game physics, not physics engine. It's more like just the matrix manipulations, linear algebra stuff encapsulated into JavaScript. So here you get the access, you get the API for GL Matrix, you get the Google Maps, Google visualization and stuff.
When you say the matrix translations, you're talking about needing to extract that to
Yeah, I'm talking about things like this. Let me show you. So I'm on the WebSharper website. You can see there's a bunch of examples. For people who actually asked about UI Next, that's your button right there. Let's say I push the button. It will take me to another site about UI Next, and it has its own samples. They may look childish to you, but there's some pretty cool stuff. Like, let's just say keyboard info and things like that. So this is like, you know, like you can go and see the source code for some of these. Some of the examples are actually a bit bigger. Some of them, you know, like little basic things like calculators. But the idea is that this gives you a client-side HTML or markup combinator language that is reactive by default. So you can say I have a model and here's my view, and you connect the two in F#, and if you make changes on the UI, the model will be affected. If you make changes to the model, the UI will be affected.
Okay, now the question is that's great, but now how do I get access to
I love people who are never satisfied. Yes.
How do I get to the raw sensory data to that sharp?
Raw sensory data from the phone. Well, you can use PhoneGap if you were observant. You probably saw this PhoneGap here.
Doesn't get it.
It doesn't get everything, but with web.
You do like form function
Into JavaScript. Not directly, not right now.
You can't add your own bindings.
You can add your own bindings. Oh, I thought you meant things like, hey, I have some C code. Can I loop it into JavaScript?
No, form function too.
That we can do, but it's doable.
Yeah, so you would just write your own form function.
Yeah, I mean, some folks.
JavaScript, and then we'll lift it up into WebSharper, and you can use that full function.
Yeah, and I mean, we could talk about how you bring foreign functionality, JavaScript functionality into WebSharper. There are 3 different ways. We have a domain.
That's important for a lot of people.
Yeah, so I can show you. Yeah, okay, so let me show you that. So let me go back to WebSharper. So under the Learn section, so by the way, for those of you who are listening online, there was a question here about how do you bring in foreign, in this case, JavaScript functionality or APIs into F#. And so here's the main page again. If you go under Learn, you can basically learn about what are pagelets and piglets and UIs and formats and whatever, all that cool stuff. And then there's a couple sections here about getting started. And what you're looking for here is working with JavaScript. WebSharper Interface Generator is a language which is an embedded DSL that allows you to write F# code for JavaScript API. So here's like an imaginary JavaScript API that has an interface with 2 functions like that, has a constructor and different members and a protocol and this and that, and then basically you put the whole thing in some namespace. When you compile this, you get a DLL, which if you load into WebSharper or a WebSharper project in Visual Studio, you get this API as F# or .NET proxies. So you will suddenly see my namespace dot whatever interface you called it, I1. But underneath, remember that here we are basically mapping APIs. So underneath, this whole interface generator is smart enough to actually output JavaScript inlines. So if I use these functions, I am inlining some JavaScript code. So if those inlines happen to be against an actual JavaScript library, which is what we call an extension in this case, to that particular library, then suddenly you're able to write F# code to address that library, and it just works. Because WebShopper takes care of the rest. It takes care of translating your F# code into JavaScript. The JavaScript will have these inlines calling into the library that you've wrapped, and you are making a Google Maps, Bing Maps, XJS, or whatever application, but all in F# code. So this is one of the primary ways of integrating an existing JavaScript library into your F# workflow. But it's not the only one. The second you can use is, like, for example, FontScript. We have ways to actually generate these bindings automatically from TypeScript declarations. A lot of libraries are available in TypeScript. You can say, hey, I don't want to duplicate this in this beautiful embedded DSL syntax in your WebShopper framework. I just want to use these, which somebody else already gave me. And I just want to use that library behind that TypeScript declaration file. I want to use that in F#. You can, but like I said, all of the extensions that you saw listed on the downloads page, they had actually been tested, they had actually been fixed and corrected, and typically it's not enough to bring a JavaScript library as is, because then you get a one-to-one mapping, and some of these libraries are really tricky to deal with from F# code. What you typically want to do is build another conceptual, more functional, or whatever you call it, layer that gives you a nice abstraction on the top of that library.
I understand that. But going to JavaScript is another layer which I don't want to go to. I want to go from F# right into this C# DLL, so whatever I'm creating.
Oh, so you want a foreign function interface, but not through JavaScript. You want it from C#.
Why would I want to do it through overhead that?
Well, because you're talking to libraries that exist only in JavaScript. If you want to say, hey, I have a thick client application that has a C# code base and it's using some native WinForms or WPF or whatever UI, then you can't expect that to work on the web because there is no bridge between WinForms into JavaScript. So that kind of foreign function.
There should be a bridge between F# and DLL.
Well, that's always there. That's an F# question. It's not a WebShopper question. So if F# can access your DLL to use some functionality maybe on your server side of your application from your C# code base, there's absolutely no problem with that.
Your program doesn't prohibit that.
It does not. Why would it? It can't. We do use ourselves in some of our applications that we are writing with WebShopper the ability to do zips, zip files and stream things in and out. So we are using external third-party DLLs that may not be written in F#. So interfacing with those is not a problem.
Okay.
And just so if you go into the examples here, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's this web audio, WebRTC, web speech. These are actually quite fun. So let's do the web audio one just for a sec. So this is like audio visualizer. Oh, sorry about that. Hopefully nobody got. So this is like feeding in some music from someplace and giving you this equalizer thing. So it visualizes, and here's the same thing for my user input. I guess maybe it's the same thing, and then I guess here if I talk, no, this is not none of the talk. This is getting the feed from external source. So you do get this very low-level access. If you think about this, we have I mean, I could hook my mic into this, and you could actually see the visualization. You could even detect what I was saying.
The visualization when you're doing this chart, is that a pre-made chart, or are you actually doing the FFT?
That's a pre-made chart that we are doing. So that chart is JavaScript chart, but it's using a library for charting. It's not our library.
Okay, you're using a library to do the FFTs on the spectrum of the sound to do the separation of rhythms.
Well, if you call it the JavaScript integration an FFI, then yes, we had to provide an extension for this particular charting library, and all of our FSI coding that results in a chart would have to have been translated to calls to that library, and therefore through the interface it just works, and that's what we did indeed. And so it's using a particular charting library. It's using Dojo charts if somebody's interested. But yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't use your own. and you just provide the charting features to map to your library instead, and you can do. We have had XJS charts and whatnot, but we decided to pull XJS off. There's a couple other things here really worth looking into. You guys can do that, but here's high charts for more charting fun. There's several other charting libraries that we can do. This actually has high stocks and high charts, so you can do some pretty funky stuff here. So just like on some of these other sites. So these are all built in. You can see the source codes, and they are not that big, and I think hopefully people can learn from them. And some of the open source extensions are really awesome examples of how you develop these extensions to your own JavaScript library. We have, in case somebody's writing larger code bases in JavaScript, or maybe you're working in a team that is working with JavaScript and you're working with F#, you want to kind of like evangelize F# for the web developers in your team, you can have WebSharper output not only the JavaScript for your F# code, but we can also output TypeScript declarations. So these guys can, using those TypeScript declaration, get a type-safe access exactly like what you are benefiting by writing F#. They can also benefit for the output of your F# code in JavaScript. Yes, 5 minutes. Okay, so we should wrap up. So one thing I wanted to show you is like you can do some pretty cool stuff. And so here's one. This is even an older example from Google. They had a library called All3D, and here's like a snooker game, a 3D snooker game. So you could do this, and then you could say, well, it's terrible.
Oh.
Well, you get the idea. So anyway, let's head back into CloudSharper. So I wanted to, well, first of all, did we ever see the WinJS? Okay, so we didn't see what version of WinJS we were doing, but we did see the application running. So I was here. So we saw PhoneJS, we did WinJS. Let's see, what else can we do? We did jQuery mobile. The only thing we didn't do is a UI Next project. So let me show you a UI Next project as a closing small application here. So here's I don't know how many of you know the To-Do MVC project. So it's like this, todomvc.com. And what they do is like they have all these JavaScript frameworks and different languages, and they have to write exactly the same application. So you go, hey, give me AngularJS. They give you the full source code, and this is what it looks like. And everybody has to make it exactly like this. So guess what? We had to do it. We had to test out our React framework. So it's right here. So let me compile. And I've been switching in and out between like probably 6-7 workspaces by now, and I imagine that I'm probably going to be hit by that memory leak that we have in the current module. So like I said, oftentimes it's a good idea to go back here. In fact, as you can see, there are some stack traces here. It's a good idea to actually shut this down and then start again. I'm not going to do that because it's still building. I could, and then I would blow myself up maybe. So I just basically say, hey, give it to me, boom, and there it is, to do MVC. And you can say Adam's laundry, and then whatever. Then you can say, hey, I'm done with this. It goes away. So if you actually study the code underneath this, you will find that, hey, it's once again, all in the client FS module, and it's actually 235 lines with all these heavy comments. There's a model underneath, a very nice formal model, and you will see that if you make changes to the model, then the UI updates. If you make changes to the UI, the model updates, because there's this reactive tie in between the two. And that's exactly what we're doing. When I remove an item, I'm changing the model. I'm saying, hey, remove that item, and the UI just automatically does its job and removes the line.
What's this called?
This is UI Next. This is the WebSharper's UI Next. There's a whole project here about, if you go back here on the main homepage under samples, well, if you go down just a little extra after all this, is WebSharper UI Next. It's a reactive foundation for your apps. Pretty ambitious, single page applications. Familiar with AngularJS? Now you can do better. Reactive DOM, observable collections, functional animations. Conal Elliott would be happy. And he's a sharp guy. And if he's happy, you guys should be happy. So
single page application.
So there you go.
One page.
There you go. So WebSharper UI Next. That is what we used. And by the way, the NuGet package for UI Next is public. So this sample will be on the CloudSharper website, and you will be able to clone it yourself and play with this code, and just basically see how easy it is to get there. It's 200 lines, like we said, with a bunch of comments removed. It would be roughly equivalent code size-wise to AngularJS. However, this is all strongly typed, and AngularJS is not. And it's very easy to miss an identifier string in your AngularJS application, and your MVC stuff just blows up. And here it's everything is all in F# code. So let me see what else I have. Maybe I have a couple more slides here. So we did this. Oh yeah, fish you guys know about. So this is for functional programmers. And I guess we had a bunch of questions, and thank you for that. But if you guys have any more questions, I'm happy to answer. Maybe Matthias, if any other people had some questions online, maybe typing into the chat. Yeah, sorry. Matthias is so you think there will be questions?
Yeah, Ryan had a question.
Okay, I didn't know if I could talk or not.
Hey, Ryan.
How are you, sir? That was fantastic.
Thank you, thank you.
So I had a question about, so I guess it's an observation. This is really slick looking, especially the parts where you could have like documentation and have code in line and show both like the markdown and snippets of code together and execute them and make them interactive. I was curious if you had any kind of lessons learned or things that you would give advice for people who want to build something similar, maybe not necessarily a full IDE, but make kind of interactive tooling available in some of their own apps, whether that's a web app or not, just kind of general things that you learned in building CloudSharper.
Well, you're going to be setting yourself up to a lot of challenges, I guess, if you do a similar idea, which I can tell you that it's not much fun to work through. One of the main things, or maybe a few of the main problems that we have encountered were around sandboxing. Like, how do you do builds between these projects? How do you switch in and out from different workspaces? How do you sandbox these so that you can actually run it on a Linux server running mono and things like that? Because when you prepare yourself for a cloud installation eventually, which is what we'll be offering pretty soon, you need to fulfill those requirements. You can't just say, hey, I need a Windows box and it's going to execute only for myself, because that's going to be a full machine for yourself just to do the type checking for your F# projects and storing your files. That's not going to cut it. You probably want a smaller instance that other people are sharing, and you definitely don't want those other people to infringe on your files. So I would say that was a big challenge for us that we had to work through. And the other big challenge, of course, is interfacing with a bunch of these JavaScript libraries, how you can do that like seamlessly and without problems. And in that, we, of course, used WebSharper. And I think it stood up to the challenge. And not least, or last but not least, is basically what kind of UI toolkit you're going to use for building the UI of your IDE. And there's a bunch of stuff that we will be doing, and we'll be rolling out a lot of things in the coming months. But as you can see, this is a fairly okay IDE. It's pretty fast. We actually switched out one framework for this particular one that we ended up with, simply because we wanted a smaller JavaScript footprint. So overall, we are pretty happy, and it took about a good year and a half to get here. So I think it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And the one thing I haven't talked about in this talk, and I'm sure that we'll cover that in many other talks, and we have a couple conference talks coming up as well, how you actually extend this whole IDE. How do you make it your own? And I think that by itself is worth another webcast for sure. How do you plug in not just your templates, but how do you plug in your code editors? Hey, I want to use the latest, greatest new features from F# what is the name of that project? I always say it the other way. The Power Tools. Is that Power Tools? The one that can give you refactoring and so on. So we definitely have plans to basically just reuse that project, because why would we want to implement all of our own code refactoring and so on functionality? I think we're going to fall back to that. But there's nothing that would keep anybody from waiting or having to wait for that. They can just go and implement their own extension. They can go here, File, New Project, and if you noticed here, there's an embedded application into CloudSharper. You can host your own intranet applications on the same backbone. Or here's a CloudSharper editor. This is a form of a extension to CloudSharper that allows me to write another F# editor. So if I have my own editor using this particular Power Tools project, and you are editing F# files, and your editor supports all the refactoring and everything coming from the project, then you just extended the way we give you F#. And thank you for that, and I would really like somebody to do that.
Sure. What about languages?
Yeah, the same way with languages. You can plug in, and there was a question here about what other languages might be the next targets. I would definitely expect JavaScript and TypeScript. Not so much C#. C# may also well be coming because it's not that difficult to plug in, because they have some nice compiler infrastructure through Roslyn. So this kind of support that we have for F# could be pretty easily finished up for C# and VB. But then the point is, again, from the very beginning, I mentioned this several times, we don't want to do an IDE. This has been on the IDE part. But the cool parts are pointing beyond the IDE. When you start embedding your applications, making customizations, etc., then you are really feeling the power. So doing analytics and doing stuff, like machine learning or doing data access and visualization and stuff is already readily built in, and you just put yourself to it for a couple days or weeks, and you can come up with some really nice and shiny things. And I think it's enabling people to do that. Community members like Matthias or other people doing interesting work, you can actually use this now at workshops, you can use it at coding dojos and meetups, whatever, and offer people an experience for F#, how they can quickly, without any barriers to entry, how they can try out F# and how they can actually work with the technologies that you're talking about, like machine learning or data visualization, data access, and so on. All of these readily plug in, and customizations or not, you can serve these to people by sharing workspace URLs or whatever, and just have people working in the same environment. And one thing I did not show, and I kept saying that I'll go back to the blog here, and I mentioned what actually do we mean here. I'm sure we won't have time for that now, but if you go back to this upcoming CloudSharper features, out of the 4 main things, I'm not even going to go into the extension API. You can read what it says, and I think that's the biggest thing. There's this thing about group sessions. And group sessions basically would allow all of us here to use CloudSharper for a particular F# meeting, doing a data learning or machine learning or data visualization or whatever, but without having to install anything. So Matthias could just say, hey, here is today's meetup's URL. You go to it, and everybody is working in the same environment without having to install CloudSharper on your machine, because Matthias set up a group session using one of the servers here, which will serve everybody. So we have that kind of a setup. So you not only have a mini cloud on your machine, but you can externalize that mini cloud onto a centralized machine, and all of us could be using that without any hassle. So that's what a group session is, in short. Yes? What?
Yeah.
The files in the Google visualization project?
Yeah, this is a part of.
Where is the file?
The welcome document.
Oh, the welcome document. The welcome document is downloaded from the main server. So it's not in any workspace. You don't need to have a workspace to benefit from the documentation. But you do need to open a workspace if you want to try snippets out of the documentation.
This is only what you can do, or we can.
You can do that as well. I mean, the thing I shared with you guys, the Google visualization, let me just switch back to the Google visualization. So that was like the 2-minute example. If you go here and then see the solution, you see that I have a README, which actually explains what this is about and how I did it. But there's a source view. I can see the source. and I can edit, or I can just split the view and then have both of them at the same place. So anybody can do this. So we have this formatting, like F# formatting. We don't do what Thomas's cool stuff does about the inferring the signatures and stuff. And Thomas is welcome to actually integrate that into CloudSharper. It will work just fine. And everything, all the tooling for F# already works just fine. and do invite other community members to actually do that work and fill in with their stuff, integrate into CloudSharper, so that other people can use F# formatting, other people can use FS snippets integrations and things like that. In fact, one of the coolest, smallest little extension I can already imagine is a little button on the top here. It says publish to FS snippets. I will just push out my stuff. And by the way, doing extensions, Loic here, one of our guys from the team, he actually blogged about how you actually do customizations. And here's a custom editor for a .foo file. And you can imagine that, hey, maybe this is F# with a little button on the top that says publish to FS snippets. Or give me an HTML markup that has all the hover over identifiers and types for the code that we're talking about. Yes, Matthias, any more questions?
I think that's what I had in mind.
Okay. Well, I thank everybody who listened in, and I wouldn't say I apologize for the delay, because I think it's good that we took some extra time to address some of these questions. But I do apologize about the initial problems that we had technically here with Chrome crashing. Believe it or not, Chrome crashed on Hangout, so we're using Internet Explorer with the Chrome plugin. I don't know how that works, to actually do this streaming. And so we should thank Microsoft. So thank you, Microsoft. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the tour. Thanks to this for hosting, and C4F Shop for running it online. And usually what we have is drinks